Good afternoon. This is an edited version of a presentation on wellness and self-preservation during COVID-19 that originally aired on May 4th of 2020. My name is Dr. Gena Castro Rodriguez. I'm the Chief of the Victim Services Division for the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. Thank you for joining our seminar today, and I hope that some of the information that we'll provide about wellness and taking care of yourself, particularly during the middle of a pandemic, will be useful to you. We will not be using the Mentimeter function during the recorded presentation. I have instead provided the results of the Mentimeter survey that was done during the May 4th, 2020 recording. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Dr. Gena Castro Rodriguez. I'm a psychologist and the Chief of Victim Services for the San Francisco District Attorney's Office. My role at the District Attorney's Office is to oversee the 9,000 cases of violent crime and the victims and survivors of those crimes every year. And we provide services including advocacy, restitution, California victims compensation, policy, and community outreach. In addition to my role in the District Attorney's Office, I also run a program called the Sentencing Planning Program. That's a program in which we have a team of people who evaluate cases that are either pending or currently active in our office. And the way we evaluate them is to look at the history, experience, and interactions of the people who are accused of harm, and try to understand if they have the ability and the desire to engage in treatment and services. And if so, we craft case plans that include community-based resources that will help address some of the criminogenic factors that have led to their current behavior, including actions that have harmed other people. Outside of the District Attorney's Office, I also am an adjunct professor at the University of San Francisco. I teach a variety of classes, including trauma and crisis, counseling across cultures, mandated reporting, lifespan development, and adolescent and child psychology. Finally, I also have a small private practice in San Francisco, California, where I treat primarily people who have experienced trauma and who are working to help manage and maintain in their current lives. Thank you for being here again, and let's get on with our presentation. First, let's talk about the agenda. We're going to talk about how the pandemic in particular affects people. We're going to talk about what we can do to improve our mental health. We're going to give some strategies and self-care tools for people to use. And then we're going to give some resources and tools that you can follow up with in your own home. Remember, we will not be using the Mentimeter during this presentation. All right, let's talk about how the pandemic affects people. The first thing is that the pandemic is unique. As a result of the pandemic, we have had a shelter in place and a quarantine. Those things are a very unique experience that have affected us in a lot of different ways. The first is that this is all new. None of us have lived through an experience like this, particularly in a worldwide fashion. It's caused severe disruption to our regular life. For many of us, it's affected the way we work, the way we go to school, the way we engage with other people, the way that we shop, the way that we move around in our regular life, including our activities, our extracurricular things we do, the things we do to take care of ourselves. Another factor is that it impacts everyone. Everyone is affected with this quarantine. Whether you are a first responder, whether you are working from home, or whether you've become unemployed or furloughed because of the pandemic, it's affecting us. There's also no clear parameters to this crisis. We don't know when it's going to end. We don't know what it's going to look like in the future. We don't know how it's going to change our world in the short term and the long term. It also has a wide range of effects. So we know that it's affecting people in our mobility and our ability to do things on a day-to-day basis. It's affecting employment, it's affecting school, it's affecting our economy. It's also affecting how we celebrate and engage in the world on a regular basis. So, you know, it has an impact on our life events. Things like weddings and birthdays, graduations, even funerals, celebrations of life, the way that we meet and gather and celebrate, all of that is being affected right now by the pandemic shelter in place and quarantine. The reason this is really important is that we know how to negotiate our world with those things in it. We are learning how to negotiate the world with those things not at our disposal. We don't have access to the same coping mechanisms right now that we may use in our everyday life to manage hard things. So we don't have structure. We're not going to work in the same way. We're not negotiating our week in the same way. Our kids, if we have them, are not negotiating their week or managing their lives in the same way. We don't have the same routines. You know, routine is really important in helping provide safety and predictability and give us a sense of what's normal, and we don't have that right now. We also don't have our friends and family to rely on. Friends and families can help us mitigate stress because we use our relationships with people to help us rejuvenate and feel better and have connection. And right now, while we are isolated and quarantining, we don't have that ability to connect with people in that way. We also have a changed sense of purpose. Maybe our roles have been changed. Maybe our jobs have changed, or what we can or can't do has changed, or our role in our family, or what we do in our community. Because those things are limited right now, we don't have that same sense of purpose. We don't have the ability to access distractions that we used to in the past. So going away for a weekend, engaging in sports activities, going to see a concert, a getaway weekend, those kinds of things are not at our disposal right now. And we are limited in what we can do and limited in our activities that we can do to manage the stress of what's going on. Additionally, we don't have the same flexibility. So where we could make decisions in the past to shift things when things were getting hard, we have less access to those things right now. So it's not as easy to move jobs or to change your schedule or to, you know, rely on other people. We just don't have access to those things right now. And then the last thing here is about variety. So during pre-pandemic time, we could shift up our week, we could shift up our day, we could shift up our month, we could plan for the future. We could move things around when things get tough. We just don't have access to that right now, which makes it much harder to deal with the stress that we're dealing with. So let's talk about what we're dealing with personally and professionally. So a lot of isolation. You know, many people are sheltering in place on their own or in their family unit or in their relational unit. And that means we're not getting a lot of interaction with other people. I'm particularly worried right now for people that are alone, particularly for elderly people who are alone and are at higher risk for illness and consequences of the pandemic. And they're not getting the social interaction or the relational interaction they would normally get. We have a lot of fear, justified fear. We don't know a lot about this virus. We don't know a lot about how you get it, what will happen when you get it, and what we're going to do in the future about it. So that causes a lot of unknowns, which cause and contribute to fear. As we get more information about this, it will help, but that unknown can make things very scary. We rightly have a lot of worry because worry comes from not knowing or being able to predict what's going to happen next. And right now there's a lot of unknown. This can contribute to either new or exacerbating anxiety. And anxiety is worrying about the future. So if we don't know what's going to happen next and we don't have good information yet, and we don't know all of the outcomes either of the pandemic itself or how we're going to deal with it, then of course it's going to lead to anxiety. We can even have grief, grief both for the loss of people, for the loss of our routine in our regular life, for the loss of the things that we don't have access to right now, for the loss of the relationships that we can't nurture and the time we're losing in those relationships. So grief is a normal part of this too. There can be helplessness. There's not a lot that we can do about this. We're trying to manage it. We're trying to mostly survive, and I'm going to talk about being in survival mode. But we are trying to deal with something that is unknown, that we haven't dealt with before, and we're doing the best we can to move from day to day without a lot of information. Loneliness is another issue that we're worried about. People that are isolated, people that don't have the kind of social connection they may have had before, people that don't have good access to technology so that they can have some connection, people that just don't connect well that way and prefer to meet in person and have not had to rely on technology. This is all new for us, which leads to the uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, how long it's going to take, what the future is going to look like, and that can increase both the sadness, the fear, and the anxiety. So what are signs of stress that we need to pay attention to? And I'm sure that many of you have experienced some of these. Changes in eating, either eating less and having no appetite or eating more. And sometimes that's out of boredom or it's out of fear or it's out of worry. Changes in sleep, particularly sleeping more or sleeping longer or feeling tired. Dreams, which are very interesting. There's a study out of Harvard right now on COVID related dreams, both for first responders, but for the rest of us that are experiencing COVID also. And they're finding some patterns in those dreams. And a lot of them are about our worry or anxiety about what's going on around us. And so you're going to see anxiety type dreams. And then there's also some returning to comfortable scenarios or returning to times when we felt safer, like dreaming about being in your childhood home or dreaming about being a child in your parents' home. Those kinds of things are about us finding safety. Harvard is doing a study on dreams during the time of COVID. If you're interested, you can Google it. And there's a survey monkey that you can link to and share the dreams that you're having during this time period. And they're going to study the clusters of those dreams and why those might be happening. We also have emotional dysregulation. So, being sad one moment, being okay another moment, maybe having some happiness and then back to sadness. So, it's okay for our moods to go up and down. One of the signs that we're looking for is if we're not able to control that, and if we feel like that is sort of beyond us and we're not able to manage it. We can have irritability, stress, frustration, worry, fear. Those can breed irritability. You can even have challenges with feeling like your brain is a little foggy or you're a little disoriented, you're losing things, you're feeling clumsy, you're not able to remember things. That's because we've got a lot of things going on for us at one time, and we're trying to manage the crisis as well as manage our day-to-day stuff. There can be hypervigilance, which is, being anxious or worried or not being able to settle, jumping when something startles you, feeling on edge. All of those things can be signs of hypervigilance. Some people experience stress somatically. So you can have aches and pains. Particularly if you're working at home, you may be have less physical activity. You may be working in a space that really isn't set up for you to work in. You may be sleeping more. You may be eating differently. All of these things could contribute to aches and pains too. You might also have racing thoughts. So particularly in the beginning of pandemic, when there was a lot of information coming out and a lot of fearful things, just sort of not being able to quiet your mind and feeling very stressed out, especially when you're listening to a lot of news about what's going on. Some people also experience numbness, feeling nothing, really feeling disconnected from what's happening and not knowing why. There's even survivor guilt. Everyone is experiencing this differently. Some people are doing very poorly. We know that people of color are disproportionately represented in people who both get the virus and who have serious medical issues with the virus. So survivor guilt could be about feeling bad that you're okay and that some people are not okay. Survivor guilt could be about getting the virus and surviving it and having very few symptoms when other people suffer greatly and even die from the virus. Survivor guilt could be about still having a job and having the privilege to work at home and to be able to feed your family and feed yourself and take care of yourself. And some people really doing poorly right now because of the financial impact. There's also withdrawal. You know, when we get depressed, when we get anxious, we tend to isolate and move away from the things that would help us mitigate that because we just feel so bad we don't want to be around other people or we don't want to interact with other people. Um, Exacerbated mental health issues. So for some people that already have underlying mental health issues, whether that's related to trauma or it's depression or it's anxiety or other mental health diagnosis, those things can be exacerbated right now as we're not able to access the things that help us manage those conditions and help us be able to walk around in the world on a regular basis. Right now we have less access to those things. And the last one is really important. Some early studies show that there's an increase in alcohol, tobacco, and drug use. Many of the studies say around 40%. That's reported, so I would guess that the numbers are even higher. And that's a really important thing to pay attention to. Sobriety or managing your anxiety or depression with substances are all much harder to do when you're alone and have less access to resources to help you. Just a note, there are AA meetings and NA meetings that are accessible online for people that need them. And there are always crisis intervention services for people that need them. All right, let's talk a little bit about the stress response system. This is kind of the 3 minutes of neuroscience. So our nervous system is broken up into two parts. We have our central nervous system, which is our brain, our spinal cord, and then we have our peripheral nervous system, which is the nerves that run throughout the body. The peripheral nervous system is the part we're going to talk about today, and it's broken up into two other parts. There's the somatic nervous system, and there's the autonomic nervous system. The somatic nervous system are the nerves that carry sensory signals from the body to the central nervous system, and nerves that carry motor signals from the central nervous system to the skeletal muscles. So it's our voluntary movement. The autonomic nervous system, which controls our fight, flight, or freeze system that I'm going to talk about right now, is the involuntary nervous system. It is responsible for regulating the internal environment of the body, and it carries signals from the internal organs to the central nervous system and back. It regulates digestion and heartbeat and the function of all of our internal organs. All right, so I want to particularly talk about two pieces of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. So you may have heard this referred to as the fight or flight response. It's also known as the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So let's talk about the sympathetic nervous system first. The sympathetic nervous system, you can remember by remembering that the sympathetic nervous system is sympathetic with trauma. So it responds to crisis and trauma. What it does is it provides increased energy, and it uses chemicals of epinephrine and norepinephrine to activate our system. So it increases our heart rate, it increases our blood pressure, it increases our sweat glands. So it's that feeling that you get when your heart starts pounding, you feel like maybe your face gets hot, your palms get sweaty. It's that feeling when you almost, someone almost hits you in a car accident, or a ball goes right by you and misses you. It's our body responding to that danger. The other side of this system that we're going to talk about is called the parasympathetic nervous system. This is the deactivating or the slowing down part of the system. And the way you can remember that is like a parachute. So it's like helping to descend from the trauma response. The parasympathetic nervous system is the part of our body that conserves energy. It's responsible for rest and digestion. This system, when activated, increases digestion, increases salivation, and decreases our heart rate. All right, so let's talk about the HPA axis. The HPA axis, like I said, is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So it's the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, and the adrenal glands, which are right over our kidneys. The hypothalamus acts like a warning detector or a warning alarm. And when it is activated, when it senses danger, when it senses that we have stress or danger, it releases corticotropin releasing hormone, CRH. That hormone tells the pituitary gland to release other hormones that are adrenocorticotropin hormones called ACTH to the adrenal glands. Those chemicals then tell the adrenal glands that they need to get into action so that we can get the body ready to protect itself. So this whole mechanism is meant to protect us. So the way that the pituitary gland tells the adrenal glands to get ready is that it tells it to release cortisol. And cortisol is an activating chemical that is going to flood through our system so that we can fight back or protect ourselves because we're in danger. So it's not just fight, but it's also if we have to run, or if we have to move things out of our way, or if we have to have strength and energy. This is the system that's going to get activated. The way that the adrenal glands and cortisol work is that the cortisol helps send blood to the skeletal muscles so that we could run or we could fight back. It also mobilizes glucose to help us sustain energy so that if we have to take care of ourselves, we've got the energy to be able to do that and deal with the stressor. When the cortisol level gets high enough, it's going to be sensed by receptors in the hypothalamus back in the brain and the hippocampus, which is next to it. And the hippocampus is where memory is interpreted and memory is stored. And you can remember that by saying if you saw a hippo on campus, you would remember them. That activation is going to help tell the body that the crisis is over and you can calm it down, right? And we call this the negative feedback loop. The negative feedback loop. So when we're using this properly, the HPA axis is going to activate our body, give it the energy and the resources it needs so that we could run or we could fight back, we could take care of ourselves. So it's going to have a stress response, but it's going to be meant for a purpose so that we can take care of ourselves. And then eventually the glucose levels are going to tell our brain, okay, we're not in danger anymore and we have a lot of glucose in our system, so shut the system down. That's how it would work if we were using this in rare circumstances. The problem is when we're under sustained stress or chronic stress, or this system is activated over and over again, it can get dysregulated. And what happens when it gets dysregulated is that the loop doesn't give the feedback to shut it off, and the HPA axis gets activated even when we're not really in danger anymore. So that elevated cortisol that was meant to protect us because we were in a dangerous situation begins to store in our body and repeat over and over again and start to cause a bunch of problems for us. So elevated cortisol can suppress the immune system and make you more susceptible to infection. It's also linked to type 2 diabetes, heart disease, obesity. It can have detrimental effects on our memory and cognition. And it's also implicated in mood disorders like depression. So we don't want this system activated over and over again. That's why we have to do things to help regulate the system so that we are not storing these chemicals. We're not repeating this cycle when we're not in danger so that we don't get the negative effects of it. All right, the Mentimeter question that we asked was, which of the following symptoms have you experienced since shelter in place? And you see that a lot of people express trouble sleeping. It's a very common symptom that people are reporting right now. One of the reasons is that we're sleeping longer. So when you sleep longer, because you don't have to commute or get up to go to work, or maybe you're not working right now, your kids are not going to school, that means that you're probably sleeping longer, and therefore you're having more REM sleep. So you're having more dream sleep. Probably why you're remembering your dreams more now than you might have been before. If you're waking up a lot during the night and you're waking up during REM sleep, that's another reason that you're remembering in those dreams more right now. You can see the second largest category is worry and anxiety. So we talked about a lot of the reasons why people are worried or anxious right now and what's going on that's causing that to happen. And the biggest issues are around this dangerous situation, the fact that it's new and we don't have a lot of information about it, and that there's a lot of unknown information about what is going to happen in the future. All right, so what can we do to improve our mental health? There are things that we can do to take care of our body and mind so that we can do better even in a crisis. So, what helps? Daily. We want to build some routine back into our lives, even if our lives look different right now. So there's some suggestions that you should still practice some kind of routine around starting and stopping work. And one of the suggestions is around having a commute. So even if your commute is from your bed to your desk, could you put in place some mechanisms for distinguishing the difference between your time on your own and your time working, or your time on your own and your time helping your kids with school, that you're separating those things? So a suggestion would be, maybe you go for a walk before you start work, and that sort of represents your commute, and then you come in and you start working. So you're creating some division between your different roles. The second is to build some structure into your day. So, even more important now than before, taking breaks. So, a morning break and an afternoon break. And if you can get out and walk around during that time, if you can, not check your phone during that time, if you can do something different, even better, right? And taking a lunch break, stopping at a certain time. So you should be starting and stopping work at similar times to pre-pandemic. You shouldn't let yourself work longer and more because you're working from home. You want to still keep that structure. You can also set some intentions during the day. Instead of just working until you're exhausted, thinking about, like, this is what I'm going to do for myself today. I'm going to make sure I take a walk. I'm going to I'm going to make sure that I get these 3 things done. I'm going to make sure that I have time with my family and make that a priority. So setting those intentions at the beginning of the day can help us follow them. You want to make sure that you're still thinking about meals and hydration and having some good nutritious food and not just quick things also. And then you want to make sure that you're having fun. So whatever fun is for you. I mean, if that's a break and, thumbing through some videos of cats or dogs, or if that's calling a friend and laughing for a little bit, if that's watching, a 30-minute sitcom or reading a book or taking a walk or a run, whatever fun is for you, making sure that you're doing that to break up your day. And then the last one on the daily suggestions is to make sure that you have some quiet time too. So we're really pushing ourselves right now during the pandemic. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of crisis. There's a lot of new ways of doing things that might take longer for us to do them. Doing work at home takes longer than doing work at our offices. So how do we incorporate some quiet time for us? And then you can do whatever you like during that quiet time, whether that's, reading or meditating or journaling or just sitting in quietness. I'll talk about some resources for that in a little bit. Just some important things to pay attention to. You have to make sure that you're taking time for yourself. It's very easy to take care of others, particularly when we're anxious or worried. It helps when we're doing things like that, but it's just as important to take care of yourself. It's also important to set limits, whether that's with your work or with your family, that it's okay to not be hyper productive during this time. It's okay to not have guilt that we're home, so we should be doing more. We should be setting limits for ourselves. Focus on what you can control. There's many things we can't control right now, but we can control ourselves. We can control what we do. We can control what we don't do. So focusing on that. Lean on your personal beliefs and faith, the things that help you get through other hard things that you still have access to. Make sure that you're utilizing those. And then look for ways to be of service if you can. So being of service actually helps you feel like you're contributing to the solution rather than waiting for the results of the problem. So if you can make masks, or you can donate money, or you can call and reach out to friends that maybe don't have as much social connection, do those things, because those will help you also feel better. All right, when to get help. So I want to make sure that we're noticing when things become more of a problem and when you should be reaching out for help. So if you're having severe trouble focusing, if you have high anxiety or ruminating thoughts and it's interrupting your daily function, if you're not able to control your emotions and you swing from emotion to emotion, or you can't stop crying or you feel numb, if you're feeling hopeless or helpless, if you see an increase in alcohol or drug use or abuse of alcohol and drugs, if you see explosive anger, if there's violence in your home or in your behavior, if you have self-harm thoughts or actions, and particularly, and so important, if you have suicidal thoughts, this is the time to reach out and get some help. And at the end, I'm going to give you some numbers and some contact information for organizations that are open 24 hours a day that you can access. Let's talk about some strategies and self-care. Okay, so there are lots of things that you can do to try to help regulate your stress response system and take care of your body and your mind. Meditation is a great tool, and there's lots of ways to do meditation. I'm going to talk about some apps at the end that are really helpful, but really meditation and mindfulness are about focusing and quieting your mind from all the other thoughts and things going on in the world and allowing yourself some time. So meditation can look like lots of different things. We'll talk about those. Breathing, taking in deep breaths, holding them, releasing, and then holding again. There's a technique called box breathing that the Navy SEALs use. You breathe in for a 4 or 6 count. You hold for a 4 or 6 count. You release for a 4 or 6 count. And then you hold for another 4 or 6 count. So it's breathe in, hold, exhale, hold, like a box. You're going to do the same amount on all 4 sides. The reason that's really helpful, it's going to slow your system down. It's going to provide really good breaths to your body, to your blood system. And it's also going to help you focus. You're going to be focused on the counting of those breaths. And I say 4 or 6 because some people can hold for a 6 or an 8 count and some people can't. So just hold for whatever you can hold. There's progressive muscle relaxation. So an example of that is, tensing parts of your body starting at your toes and moving up. You hold it for 5 seconds and then you release. So particularly if you're getting some somatic responses, like sort of that itchy feeling, that anxious feeling, try tensing your toes first, hold for a count of 5 and then release. Then move up to your calves, hold tensed muscles for 5 seconds and then release. Move up to your thighs, etc., your waist, your torso, your arms, even your face, and then release. There's also anchoring. So focusing on something, whether it's a real object or it's a picture in your mind, focusing on it and looking at the details of that object. What is the texture of it? What are the colors of it? What is the finish of it? What is the brightness of it? That's going to allow your mind to focus for a little bit and to block out the other things, the other thoughts, the other feelings for a moment. There's visualization exercises. One I do with clients a lot is the box exercise. So, we've talked about a lot of stressful things in a session, and I might ask them to visualize a box. And while they're visualizing the box, I ask them to visualize what it looks like, what it feels like, what the colors are, what is the consistency of the box, what is it made of, so they focus on it for a little bit. And then visualize the stressful things that we've talked about or the worries that they have floating into the box. And then we're going to put a cover on the box and they're going to visualize tying that box up and fastening it tightly. Then they're going to take the box and they're going to visualize that box going up on a shelf. So the worries, the stress, the anxieties that they have are not gone, but they are secure for right now and they're put away. And what they're able to do then is focus on other things and not have to carry that around with them. It's there. We can open it back up if we need to, but it doesn't have to sit on the surface. There are many other visualization or exercises you can Google. Make sure you're taking frequent breaks, particularly if your job requires you to sit for long periods of time on a computer. Have some leave work at work rituals. So, some examples might be I'm done with work at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. And what I do is I change my clothes so that I know I'm no longer working, or I shut the computer down and I don't go back to it till tomorrow, or I close the room that I was working in and I don't do anything else in that room. If you have the luxury of doing that, many of us are working in our regular space and we don't have that ability. Limit social media and news. You know, the constant barrage of information, particularly when the information is not getting us to the next place, is really hard for us to manage. So pick a couple of sources that you like and that you trust and you get good information from, and check those, but don't sit with the TV on 24 hours a day, or don't read everything that pops up on your computer. Limit it for yourself so that you're getting updates, but you're not burdening yourself with too much information. At the end of the day, if you have a couple of minutes, it doesn't even take that long, focus on something you're grateful for, some kind of gratitude. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful that my family is safe. I'm grateful that I was able to work today. Just some things that sort of end your day, focusing on the things that you're grateful for. Make sure that you maintain connection to your support systems, particularly your relationships. Have compassion for yourself, and that includes not pushing yourself so hard that you're exhausted and you're doing more than you should be doing. Also, have some gratitude for yourself and all the things that you're doing well in the middle of a pandemic. Reframe things if you can. If you're feeling negative about something, see if there's something that you can reframe that or think about that differently. So if you're thinking, I'm home and, my kids are home and they don't get to go to school, maybe you could think about, this is an opportunity for me to see my kids in a different way or to have a different experience with them. If you're thinking, I'm home and I don't get to go to work, maybe you could think, this is a time for me to have some more self-care time, to sleep a little more, to, enjoy my home a little bit more. I know these things are about the privileges of us being a secure, safe place. I recognize that, and I hope that you all recognize that too, but that we are also appreciating what we do have, what our blessings and our privilege are. And then the last one is making sure that you're having fun. So just because there are hard things going on in the world doesn't mean that we can't also have some enjoyment, and that we actually need to have some enjoyment. So it's okay to smile and laugh and enjoy things and be grateful for things, even when things going on in the world are hard for people. All right, let's talk about left brain, right brain. Just very quickly, I want to touch on that, work is exercising our left brain. It's the more analytical part of our brain. It's responsible for logic, it's responsible for problem solving, mathematics, facts, and analytical thinking. So that's a lot of what we're doing all day with work, right? So in our off time, in our non-work time, we really want to try to focus on using and exercising our right brain, which is more of the imagination side of our brain, the intuition side of our brain, the creativity, the expression, and the emotions. Now, no one activity is solely left or right brain. And so I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we spend a lot of time in our left brain at work, and that in our free time, we should exercise and push the right side of our brain activities, things that sort of provide us experiences in the different realm. All right, so that brings us to self-care. Let's think about some things that we could do more in that right brain domain that are about self-care. So, things like taking a walk or going for a run, doing something physical, writing or journaling, doing a puzzle or playing a game, listening to music, gardening, playing with our pets, walking our pets, reading something funny or enjoyable, something that's outside of our scope of work, listening to a podcast that we like, taking a hot bath or a shower and relaxing, cooking or baking, doing yoga or other stretching or meditation exercises, painting, drawing, being creative with color is really helpful. And then watching a movie or something that you enjoy that's sort of mindless, and you don't have to use that other side of your brain, you're just enjoying what you're watching. These are really important activities. One of the questions we asked in the Mentimeter was, what kinds of things are you doing to take care of yourself? You see a very big exercise in the middle. That means that a number of people stated that was what they're doing to help manage and provide self-care right now. You also see walking, cooking, reading, family. Those are all big mechanisms that people are using in order to mitigate the stress of what's going on in the pandemic right now. All right, let's talk about resources and tools. So these are San Francisco specific, the first one, and then the rest are some statewide and national resources. The first is if you're an employee of City and County of San Francisco, you have access to the San Francisco Employee Assistance Program, or the EAP. The EAP has now established a 24/7 hotline, and the numbers are provided here. You can reach out and talk to a live person and get some assistance if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you want access to some more short-term resources. There's also a crisis text line, and that number is 741-741. You can reach out to that if you feel like you're in crisis or need to speak to someone, and texting is more comfortable for you. There's also the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That's a 24/7 hotline, 800-273-TALK or 8255. There's a disaster distress hotline, which is set up for when there's a natural disaster, but it's activated right now for people during this crisis. You can call 24 hours a day and talk to someone about what it's like to be under a stressful situation like the pandemic. You can also text "Talk with Us" or "Hablamos" in Spanish to 66746, and you can speak to someone in English or Spanish by text. There's also the California Peer Run Warm Line. These are other city, county, state workers who are there to talk to you about your stress or your concerns or what it's like to work during the pandemic and the kinds of resources you might need access to. So please access that. 855-845-7415. They currently only have certain hours, so I've listed those hours. For LGBT adults and young people, there's the Trevor Lifeline. It's a 24/7 hotline where you can speak to peers who can answer questions, provide resources, talk to you about the stress that you might be under. There's also a chat and text option, and those are listed here. You can text START to 678-678. There's also the Trans Lifeline, which is for trans people who are experiencing stress, even hate crime or trauma during this time, or any kind of concerns that you have that you need to reach out to someone, and you're looking for resources or someone to talk to. The telephone number there is 877-565-8860, and that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then finally, there's the Warm Line, and these are for elderly people who either need resources, they're stressed out, they want someone to talk to, or even if they just want to connect with someone because they're isolated. So the Warm Line has volunteers that answer the phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and their phone number is 855-845-7415. Here are some tools that you can use after this workshop to help you manage the stress from the pandemic. There are some online therapy sites. I'm not endorsing any of these sites. I'm not connected to any of these sites, just giving you some options of places to connect for online therapy or telehealth right now. There's betterhelp.com, talkspace.com, 2chairs, or headspace.com. Again, not endorsing any of these. Explore them for yourself as an option. Also, most therapists are doing telehealth right now. So reaching out to an individual therapist, you may be able to do sessions through phone or through Zoom or other apps. There are some meditation apps. I like Calm and Headspace. There are two that I often refer to people. Calm has sounds, and they have stories, and they have vision, like videos that you can watch. So I really like them because it's for people that need resources in different formats. I also like Intimand, which is the Spanish language one that is all in Spanish, if you're interested in that one. And then Liberate, which is a Black and African diaspora site that talks about It has lots of resources in indigenous African music and chants and drums. So you have some really good options here. And then for online, there's an example of box breathing that I described. There's a link to some tips for mindfulness and coping with anxiety. And then there's trauma informed yoga. So because you will not have the links to this listening to the video, you can Google these and find them online.